So first of all, tell me a little bit about what, kind of everybody else, what it is that you're passionate about, what your focus is, and how that connects to your story. And let's lead into it that way.
Yeah, and I appreciate that lead in, because that's really the focus of this story and some of the events of my life and how they really defining this chapter in my life and then my future. And so I'm very passionate about multiple things, as you know, but a lot of what I do and I'm passionate about is rooted in education. So I am in my 18th year teaching as a public school art teacher. And through being an art teacher and also feeling empowered to be a leader through my educational experience, I am very passionate about connecting with the community on artistic things like how to be creative, even if you think you don't have any artistic skill. How do you use creativity and artistic practice to take care of yourself and your mind and your body? How to coach people and cheer them on to become their own authentic artist in this artistic community that we have. Yeah. And those are the first part of the education, the artistic side, which there's a link between the stories, as I'm sure we'll get to. And then my biggest passion is connecting with the community and educating on LGBTQ plus inclusiveness and how to teach people to support my community, because I am part of that community, and also not only support the community, but feel active in allyship. And there is a space on both sides, one to make my community feel safer and seen and heard. And on the flip side, like I just said, empowering people to feel like they know what to do, they know what to say, they know how to take action and create change. And as a whole, those are my passions, and they really came together through life experiences and living my authentic life and my authentic self. And it took a while to get there. I think it takes a long time for a lot of us to get to, and it's also evolving. Who we are now may not be who we are in a year or 2 months or 6 years, right?
Yeah, that is the truth.
And I love that about your story as well, because we just, at certain times in our life, we made non-negotiable decisions about who we are, what we stand for, what we saw our futures to be. And there was a lot of risk involved in so much of that.
It's always nice to be able to hear another person's story of really what brought them there, and the experiences that brought them to where they are today. And because it always seems to interweave with what it is that they do in business and in life now and their purpose. So I'd like for you to share that with me, and because you had said that you're willing to, and I'm so glad you are, because your experience is very impactful. So tell us a little bit about what makes Susie Susie, and what is it about your past and your experience, and whatever you feel like and comfortable telling us about that have brought you to where you are.
Yeah, well, and thank you for the opportunity to share and to hold space together as we had that.
Thank you.
I agree, a very special conversation with, we didn't know each other before this conversation, I think 2 weeks ago. And now I feel very lucky to have you in my life and your wife.
Likewise.
Thank you. So I'll talk about two different stories. I'll talk about the art story.
Okay.
And then I'll talk about the other story. Actually, I'll start with flip-flop. So really what brings me to this space, especially in LGBTQ inclusiveness, is my experience of coming out. And really, I partially came out, but I really was outed. And so what that means, in case the audience may not be familiar, is that somebody knows your gender identity and or sexual orientation, and they disclose that information to other people without your consent. And sometimes that happens just by an honest accident, usually in the workplace. That's where that happens. But what happened in my sense, I had some people very close to me, and that's what occurred. And so I don't necessarily focus too much on that. What came after that was very hard. It was PTSD, it was anxiety, it was depression, it was feeling lost and lonely. And discarded and unloved. And I knew who I was. Finally, I was in my late 20s, and I fell in love. Met my now wife. We've been together for 12 years, married for 8, and actually 12 years yesterday. So,
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I finally, when I was with her, I just knew it. I just had the ease. I had the confidence with being myself around somebody. And I just didn't realize that I would fall in love with a woman, or that I was open to falling in love with a woman. But as soon as that happened, I knew it. And I was just trying to take some time to understand the magnitude of that realization, and not that it's a bad magnitude or realization. It just was a massive life shift. And I disclosed this information. And I disclosed this information to somebody, and I had said, please don't say anything yet. And they chose to disclose this to other people close in my life. And it was a long time ago now, and there's been a lot of progress made, but the wounds were there. They still come up. There's trauma that you can heal from, but it generally doesn't ever go away. And moving down the line of the story, and I think we talked a lot about that part, and what do you do with that? I had great community. I had great friends, some of my family. I mean, coming through to pick me up on really the darkest days of my life. There's only been a few close to those days, and I'm so lucky for that, because not everybody will have that support system, which leads me to the next point of the story of many years after this major thing happened, and there was progress, and there was forgiveness and healing. I was still sitting with this story. And I hadn't said it to anybody except for a few close in my life. And being in public education, we go through many trainings every year. And one of them is about suicide awareness and self-harm in youth. And for the first time ever, this is about 5 years ago, there was a separate slide in that presentation for LGBTQ youth.
Wow.
And that they are 200 to 300% more likely to commit suicide or some form of self-harm.
Oh gosh.
And that day I have I wish you could see, I have goosebumps because it's 5 years later, and I remember distinctly in that meeting, right? I know you felt
that's a remarkable percentage, but yeah, you're right. I felt that. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And I'm happy to come back to that percentage, because it is so alarming, and it demanded its own slide, in one of the largest public districts anywhere. And I'm thinking, okay, so I held that, and then I was thinking about the story, and within 24 hours, I was in my principal's office, and I said, hey, and he knows me, he knows my story. I said, we need to do something about this. We need to talk about that number. Why is it on its own slide, yet we have no conversation about it? We have no training or education of how to support our LGBTQ youth. And on that day, I was supported by a leader, which does not always happen.
No, it doesn't.
Especially in public education with this subject. And he said, go, what do you want to do? And so I actually started the only training educational space for teachers and staff members. It started at my school to understand and support. Thank you.
That's awesome.
I don't know if I told you that part before.
I don't remember that part. That's awesome. This is why I do this. We get more. I love it.
Got more. For how to support those students. And so that started 5 years ago. I did it with one other teacher. She came along with me, and I said, hey, you want to do this with me for a few years? And the past 2 years of the 5, we started working with the school district and saying, hey, people are starting to hear about this at different schools. And now, well over probably 350, 500 education, something on those lines. I've spoken at many conferences. We're now helping educators understand, because that statistic in 5 years still hasn't really wavered.
Oh man. You see, those conversations have to happen.
Exactly. And how? Because if you're talking about at-risk youth, that's telling us, and then think about the intersectionality. Add different factors of risk and where we're at.
That's right.
So what
Yeah.
happened in the story of, I went through this. So at the same time in these 5 years, I started telling the story as part of the training. And that's the number one on the feedback forms, the number one thing people say are most effective. Yes, the tips and tools for the classroom is the story. And I thought,
Story.
really? I'm just telling it because it's kind of a
Yeah.
cathartic healing process for me.
Right. Yeah. That's what we all kind of do, right? We tell our story because it feels healing. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow,
Yes.
people actually want to hear this. And it helps
And
people.
I know you understand that for
I
sure.
do. Yeah.
And then the past couple of years, I just started talking to my friends that aren't in education about what I was doing. And they started saying, can you speak on this panel about the story? Or can you come into our, ERG, or can you talk to our C-level suite about how to support and understand LGBTQ people in the workforce? And I said, sure. So naturally, my consulting company was being built underground and behind the scenes for the past 2 years. And it's somewhat officially launched, but it's called With Pride Consulting. And yes, that's the business. But what you said is, this story I didn't realize was impactful. Well, I can harp on all the negative. I can still be angry. I can still have hurt, and those come up. But what I also think is, thank you. Now I could actually look at those people and say, thank you. And there has been healing on many parts. And what a beautiful thing that I can say, I now can maybe make a change for some people. And it's not that I want any pat on the back or I want any attention. It's to say what I have to say, teach. Everything's rooted in education. Teach what I know and continue learning myself. And I'm just one voice of a very large community. And I recognize where I stand in the community. We talked about that, of the privilege I hold, within my own community and in general.
Right.
I will use my voice, and I will pass the mic when I feel it is absolutely necessary and respectful. I'm out there talking, and I really hope that people listen, because not only for our LGBTQ youth, the educational part, guess who's going to be the workforce? So, so that's the who am I? How being outed redefined my purpose, and letting go of so much of that anger.
Yes.
And it's not about
a big one.
The person or the people. It's about this story. And I love those people. I love, I'm an extrovert that loves a lot of people. And it's, I just, that's kind of the stepping stone. I mean, what a beautiful gift. It redefined the whole path of the rest of my life. And for a while, I didn't think for the good, but now I know there was a purpose, and I survived. I survived because, number one, I was in my late 20s. I had just gotten out of that high risk category, even though I was still at risk. And I had support. Our youth, the people in our workforce, our peers, people may think that they have people out there. Not everybody does, and especially our kids.
That's right. That's true. The most vulnerable and the most influenced. Right. And that is so important. And that's a very good point, is bringing that awareness to that piece of it. So I've got a question for you that came up. And one thing you said is, at one point you realized, it's time now to thank them. You and I had this conversation, how you said, you've changed your view. So at one point, and I was there too, at one point, you have the anger and you've got the distrust and you've got these, and it begins to eat you up and change who you really are. And then, so at what point and how, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what did you do to say, or what happened? He's like, I've got to pivot my thinking. You've realized that what happened was part of who I am today. What did you go through there? What made that happen, or some series of things that may have made that change happen in you to look at it the way you do now, and to make that determination to make people aware? Like, that seems like that was your pivot point. We're like, I've got to tell this. And so what was it that did that? Was there anything? Maybe there wasn't. I'm just curious.
Thank you for that question. It's a series of different things, which actually could at some point lead us back to the art, because there's a lot of linking of certain things here. So,
Okay.
the aha moments we love. I'm an Oprah person, so, aha moments.
Yeah, I say that. I say
So,
that frequently myself.
it wasn't just one thing. Now, the biggest aha moment I had was in that meeting, in that meeting. And I just was overcome by, I can't describe what it was, but it was motivation. It was energy. I was in a lot of therapy for a long time. And I believe in support for mental health. And I actually recently started again, just because we have life. And I think it's important. And I'm very open and authentic about it. So I was lucky enough, and I'm privileged enough to be able to afford mental health care, and I had some great friends and family to support, listen. And some people that didn't want to listen at first started listening. So it was just this process of, on the personal side, some healing. And it's not all perfect by any means, but it is a gift to be where I am today, with so many wonderful people in my life. And also, so it's that kind of self-care, and moments come up and down. They still do. And I think they will forever, but I hold that space with myself. I used to get very frustrated with myself of, shouldn't this be over? Shouldn't I? Well, we can't should. I'm learning. We can't should ourselves. And so
That's right.
shouldn't do that. And then when I became a parent, so we had our first child, and I went through a lot of pain and emotional pain trying to have a child, and had just resurfaced different things, different feelings, and different traumas in different senses. When we had our first child, and our first child was maybe 2 or 3 in this. It was kind of around the same time as the meeting, but I just thought, I have to cleanse some stuff in me. And how am I going to cleanse? Well, it was by understanding fully. And I was already married, already had a child. I'd been through other things. Fully saying, this is who I am. I'm unapologetic for it. And yes, I'll start talking. And as you know, I like talking. And I knew I'm great at talking. I like talking. It doesn't mean I'm the best speaker or educator, but I love educating. You're basically performing every day. I've been performing for teenagers for almost 18 years.
That's awesome.
So, and there's always honing your craft. I hope you know me a little bit by now. I hope everybody can understand. I'm just kind of joking.
Yes. You always hone it. Yeah.
But you're kind of on, and I just thought, so talk, what do you do? I am creative. I like my community. I'm a loving person who's extroverted. Open your mouth and say something.
Right.
And so those things, just being authentically unapologetic, about who you are, what you believe in. I'm not backing down.
Because you're a very powerful force, and people need it. And there's so many voices there's so many people that don't have the voice, or don't feel like they have the voice. And then it's people like yourself that's there to do that. It's really amazing to me, as and you might know this, but we've partnered with some experts in the diversity and inclusion space. And this is a big part of it, in my opinion. And because it creates that avenue for people to be aware in the workplace even. And so what blows my mind about this is that inclusion laws, the first law was in 63 for inclusion. 63. And we are in 2020. We're looking at almost 60 years ago, and we're still having these challenges and conversations about some of the same things. We've made some improvements and strides. I mean, that is obviously the case. I mean, even back to when I grew up in the 80s. Then and now is completely different. There's a lot of awareness now, but we have so much more to go. And those laws only came about because of voices, all of them. And so we've got a lot of room to grow here.
Well, and you were saying because of the voices and thinking about one voice, it's somewhere it's my art social media, but when the first wave of riots happened in Raleigh, back in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I went downtown and to clean up. You know, what could we do? We're very connected to the small business community and the city of Raleigh. We live in Cary, but we just thought we're going to do something. And we were sweeping up glass, and we were in a darker space, and I looked down, and this sounds like I could make it up. It's proof on social media, but, and the way that the light hit the glass, one was like a rainbow iridescent, and not rainbow in the LGBTQ sense, but just it was shining differently than this other pile of glass. And it just stuck with me. And what I wrote is, and I'll paraphrase, is that we've got all this pile here. I have all these pieces, but please believe that the one was shining different. One voice, one action. It may seem small, it may seem insignificant to what you were just saying, but it can help change.
You're so available and so willing to share your story and so willing to listen. So thank you so much for that, Susie. This is, we need people like you. I find I'm honored and privileged that we had a chance to meet, and that we've met you, and that you're now part of our life. It really does mean a lot to us. So thank you so much for sharing all that information with us.